Boom shakalaka, ladies and gents, freaks and geeks, beautiful brothers and sisters around the world. It is your boy Krishool, aka the esoteric Noetic, aka the chocolate Nubian soul brother from Ghana, West Africa. And I thought I would get deep into this taboo topic. All right, now everyone's been talking about the Epstein files. I really don't care that much about it. I know everyone wants to know who's in the files. I feel a little jealous anytime I find out that I wasn't invited to the island because all the rich and powerful people were, right? And I've always wanted to be rich and powerful. But all jokes aside, this video is epic because it gets people to question their position on this topic in terms of what it actually means to be a PDF, all right? And I've had this conversation many times because most people just have this knee-jerk response to any topic that gets them morally outraged, right? Not thinking about what words actually mean, not thinking about their arguments. And I think it's very important anytime you are confronted with a topic like this, right? As important as this, to be able to make your arguments logically consistent, understand what words mean, the definitions of things. And this is a topic that very much invites people to do that. Anyway, let's hear what this guy had to say in regards to Jeffrey Epstein and his PDF activities. All right.
Do you doubt Jeffrey Epstein was a paedophile?
Yes. There's no evidence that Jeffrey Epstein ever exhibited sexual attraction or engaged in sexual activity with any prepubescent children. That's the clinical definition of pedophilia. Look at any of the medical literature. Look at any of the medical associations, whether it's in Britain or the United States. Look how it's defined. Don't take my word for it. Google it right now, please.
This guy's making a salient point. Because just bear with me, right? Because first of all, if I'm not mistaken, he said, yes, he thinks that, but he's also gone on to say there is no actual evidence to support him being a PDF in terms of engaging in sex with actual prepubescent children, because that's actually what the definition means. But I think most people, they just skim over what he said in terms of the definition and don't realize that there is an actual definition for pedophilia. But most people have just accepted this ubiquitous colloquial understanding of it, right, which is actually false, right, and highly subjective, and just said, well, he had sex with someone that was under 18 years old or was showing attraction towards that. That makes you a PDF. By that definition, let me be very clear about this. All men are PDFs because you would not be able to objectively determine the difference between someone that was 17 years old and someone that was 21, 22, 23 objectively. And the vast, vast majority, the high percentage of men cannot. I mean, typically what happens is most people find out what someone's age is, and then they say, oh, that's disgusting, because of the social stigma around it. But let's be very, very clear. In terms of making the distinction, most people can't. And most people, from my understanding, are working with this definition that a PDF is someone that is interested in someone that is under the age of 18. That's not even the legal definition in the United States. Most people have just adopted this fallacious understanding of that, right? Bearing in mind that the age of consent varies from state to state in the United States. Averages around 16.7. It gets as low as 14, 15, 12 in certain parts of the world. I think it's 20 in Tunisia. It's 9 in Yemen, and it is something that has been changing. And if you actually have a look at the statistically around the world, yeah, as disgusting as it may be, it actually averages around 14. So depending on what definition legally you're using, I mean, you're just playing this arbitrary game. But the clinical definition, right, the actual definition is a primary attraction towards prepubescent children, right? And the scientific biology here is that these human beings have not reached the age of adolescence here. They have not actually gone through puberty. They have not had their first menses, all right? And that's how we biologically make the distinction. But most people don't like to have that kind of higher thinking about what they're actually saying, and just make these dumb arguments. And this is the thing I find so fascinating, because there is this stigma around being called a PDF, right? It's like if you say something that is logically consistent, however, people perceive you as supporting something that is atrocious, people don't want to say that, It's kind of like with the situation with Israel right now, and obviously the war in the Middle East, right? People don't want to be called antiseptic, right? So when they are asked this question, do you think that Israel is committing war crimes and so forth? They say, oh, look, it's a very complicated topic. They can't state the obvious. And this situation to me is no different. Now, regardless about how you feel about Epstein, let's be very clear. From what I've read, and I don't know that much about him, obviously, but based on what I've seen and what I've read, it doesn't seem like the nicest guy, right? However, in terms of the evidence, I'm pretty sure that we're dealing with young adults here. As much as I hate to say it, but this is the reality of the situation. They're not children, in at least the cases that I come across. They are people that were not prepubescent, right? Women that were not prepubescent. Of course, people don't like to use the term women because it's so outrageous to them. They're like, these children are 17, 16, 15 years old. It's absolutely disgusting. But that's the American kind of mindset, it seems, because the reality is around the world, in most countries, these children are actually not children. And it's not to advocate for anything that Jeffrey Epstein was doing. I mean, this guy has probably committed a whole bunch of heinous crimes here. But what I find interesting is most people won't make the distinction, and they just in between what is legal and what is actually biological in terms of the actual definition of pedophilia, and they start making these just flawed arguments. And this guy's trying to make that distinction, and of course he's getting hit in the head with this dumb Momo argument, right? Even though he said, at least from what I can hear, that he does think Jeffrey Epstein is a PDF. However, there is no actual evidence to support it, which is a very legit distinction.
That is the definition of pedophilia as a pathology. Now, it's always been defined, but it's been broadened out now to encompass people who are 17 years old who would have been above the legal age of consent in Britain and the majority of U.S. states. Now, any sexual activity involving that person is considered to be pedophilia, and that gets hysterically cited day in and day out to generate this totally unfounded mass pedophilia and child rape crisis that causes people to deactivate. Can we agree
he's making a very sound point. And look, I get people to also just remember that not long ago, I mean, back in, this is just to give people context, just in regards to how stupid this train of thought is, right? In regards to PDF being whatever it is that the state declares as being PDF, right? It's just a very morally amorphous argument. I mean, about 100 years ago, right? Maybe a little over 100 years ago, the age of consent in California was 10, right? That means that if you were having sex with someone that was, let's say, 11 years old, you weren't a PDF, right? Now, that sounds absolutely outrageous to most of us, right? But if we play this game where we just go on whatever the state decides to be age of consent, it's completely arbitrary. Now, granted, it may be considered 18 for most people, based on what they understand as being PDF. And this is the thing what I find so amusing. I mean, first of all, bearing in mind that that's not even what it is in the United States. It is federally, right? But state by state, it's actually... it varies and averages around 16.7, but it's changing from state to state. It's changing from country to country. And maybe in the future, with the way things are progressing, maybe the age of consent might be 25 in another 20, 30 years now, where we've managed to extend our lifespans, right? I mean, at the moment, they have technology with this Yamanako gene of some sort that's able to actually potentially extend our lives. Now, it's not crazy to think that in another 20, 30 years, people will be living a lot longer, and now we're increasing the age of consent, and now anyone that's having sex with someone that is under the age of 25 is considered a PDF by this frame of thought. But unless, of course, you use the biological definition, it's just arbitrary, right? But most people can't do that, and this is what I find... Now, most people find it disturbing, right? Because they have this cognitive dissonance, right? But I find it disturbing that most people cannot see the illogical argument at play when they make these legal arguments. It's 18. That doesn't mean anything. Age is this, it's a very amorphous construct. However, if you base this on biology, on whether or not someone is biologically in a position where they can actually procreate, I mean, nature is basically saying that they are ready to procreate, ready to have sex, then it's nothing that is inherently unnatural, at least based on biology. But most people cannot do that. And most of the world, throughout most of history, actually, we've had this idea that, that someone that is a child is someone that has not actually reached first menses, all right? So they haven't gone through the biology in order to actually develop the physiology that we would attribute to feminohood, right? And we obviously use age as a general approximation in order to classify that. But if you want to get a bit clearer with your thinking, you don't use age, you use definitive points, like whether or not someone has reached their first menses, whether or not someone is actually able to produce, so forth, or is going through puberty, right? And I think this makes a lot more sense than this arbitrary notion of age of consent that is determined by the state. And this is the point this guy's trying to make. And I just find it so interesting that people get so wilded up by this topic that they just make these retarded arguments.
It's a sex
and
trafficker,
go absolutely
then.
nutters.
Okay, you don't like the word paedophile. We will agree to disagree on that strongly.
It's not that I don't like it. It's just not accurate. I thought journalists were supposed to be precise.
Sex trafficker. Was he a sex trafficker?
I know. I mean, this is and look, in terms of sex trafficking, and look, that's a legal definition. And the thing is, from what I understand, I could be wrong about this. When it comes to sex trafficking, we're talking about, I believe there's an element of coercion involved here, at least from the legal definition. But it's basically where you're trafficking children, or actually not even necessarily children. I think maybe it is. Sex trafficking is a form of human trafficking involving use of force, fraud, or coercion to compel an individual to engage in commercial sex act. That makes perfect sense. Yeah, did he use coercion? Did he? I mean, this is the thing. Like, I hate making this argument because I am such a logically consistent person that I have to make logical arguments. Unless, of course, Epstein was actually coercing people, like saying to these minors, right, or these young women, right, that, look, unless, of course, you come to my island, I'm going to kill you, or I'm going to do something that I don't have the right to do to you. That's actually not sex trafficking. Sex trafficking would be, unless, of course, you come over to my island, I am going to pop a cap in your ass. I am going to take money from you. I'm going to do something that I don't have the right to do to you. That would be sex trafficking. So legally speaking, and look, you got to realize, look, this is the thing about when you were trying to be logically consistent, it's not about whether or not you like someone. Because a lot of people, I can imagine what the comments are going to be like. Oh, you're supporting Jeffrey Epstein. No, I'm supporting the truth. This is what Trump supporters do, right? Purely because they like Trump or they don't like Trump. They can't look at a situation objectively. You see, people that are actually serving the truth can do things like that and say, you know what, despite the fact that I like and don't like this person, the evidence shows that they were committing a crime. I mean, I could take Hitler, for instance. I mean, this is one of my other favorite arguments that people like to put forth. And obviously, we all know Hitler's a bad person, killed lots of people. But did Hitler kill 6 million Jews? And I know what a lot of you people are thinking, yeah, the figure, we don't know about the figure. Well, did Hitler kill any Jews for that matter? I mean, I don't know if he did. Because here's the thing. There is a distinction between speaking language and inciting people to do things, right? And actually killing them. Like, if I tell people I don't like, etc., these people, right? I don't like Africans. Let's go with that, right? Let's play it safe, right? And I tell people that I wish Africans were dead and you should go kill Africans, right? Of course, I would never say something like that. And I don't kill any Africans. I effectively haven't killed any Africans. And it's these little distinctions, right? I think they're big distinctions that most people cannot make. And they just make these irrational arguments like, oh, Hitler was a horrible person, he killed many Jews. Well, yeah, Hitler may have been a horrible person, but I don't think he killed any Jews. And similarly, when it comes to Epstein, sex trafficking, Epstein being a PDF, the evidence based on the definitions of these words doesn't actually support that. And of course, people are going to get mad, but make a coherent argument, and I will agree with you. But I'm not going to agree with something just because I don't like someone. And most people can't do that when it comes to Epstein.
Rape crisis that causes people to deactivate their critical faculties and go absolutely nutters.
Okay, you don't like the word paedophile. We will agree to disagree on that strongly.
It's not that I don't like it. It's just not accurate. I thought journalists were supposed to be precise.
Sex trafficker. Was he a sex trafficker?
Orwell, didn't George? Am I like misremembering like my readings of George Orwell? Not that I'm comparing.
But this is a bit like saying, Michael, with respect, this is a bit like saying because Jimmy Savile wasn't convicted of any crime, it's
This is exactly how I feel in regards to the argument this guy's making in regards to Orwell, how people obfuscate language, you know. It's like we did this with the word magic potions, right? And you know what I'm talking about, not that long ago, right? The vaccines and whatnot. People have changed the definition of that in regards to this notion of, anyway, I'm not going to go there for obvious reasons, but if you actually have a look at the classical definition of what it constitutes a vaccine is, and actually have a look at what we have going on right now, very, very different, or what it means to be an anti-vaxxer, right? And it's become this thing now where, oh, you're opposed to forcing people to actually undergo medical procedures and so forth, which means you're a good person, right? And most people have twisted this definition in order to suit their ends. They call anyone an anti-vaxxer, not because they're completely opposed to all vaccines, right? But purely because these are people that actually believe in autonomy. They're actually classically moral people. They don't believe in using the force of the state in order to inoculate people. And definitions have meanings. The problem I have is people like to obfuscate these definitions in order to suit their gender. I don't play that game. I may have a position on something, but I'm not going to obfuscate reality in order to achieve that goal. And most people, it seems to me, particularly politicians, can't do that shit. And this is a classic example. I would say the vast majority of people, when you have this conversation with them, they lose their mind because they don't want to think objectively in regards to what words mean. If you want to make an argument and say that, hey, look, you hate Jeffrey Epstein because he was having sex with people you considered too young, taking advantage of them, he was doing things that you just don't approve of, respect. I can respect that. But if you want to use words and change their meaning in order to make your arguments, call him a PDF, call him a sex trafficker and so forth, I actually didn't even know that sex trafficking had that definitive definition. It doesn't fit, it just doesn't fit the parcel, right, so to speak, right? If it don't fit, you must acquit.
Is it fair to call him a paedophile? Is it fair to call Jimmy Savile a paedophile, even though he was never convicted of any crime?
That's not the argument this guy's making, and it's not about being convicted of a crime. It's about whether or not the accusation fits the definition. So I don't know enough about Jimmy Savile, but if he was not actually having sex with people that were prepubescent children, right? We're talking about prepubescent humans here, then it wouldn't fit the definition. And it's got nothing to do with whether or not you like Jimmy Savile or like any of these characters. And it's not about whether or not you've been convicted of the crime. I mean, and that's not even absolute. Just because you've been convicted doesn't mean that you definitively did it. But assuming that conviction does imply you have done the crime, then yeah, obviously that's a very different situation. But the problem with this guy is he's getting so freaking wilded up over here that he can't make logically coherent arguments. And I've realized just the vast majority of people on many topics, they get like this, you know? I feel as if when I'm doing this, I know I'm doing it. Like when I'm getting really angry, and I'll just say, fuck you, I don't fucking care. Fuck you, I don't want to talk to you. But a lot of these people believe they're bullshit, don't realize that their arguments are completely non-coherent. And you can tell this because of the follow-up arguments they make. They make less and less sense. They're non sequiturs.
I thought that George Orwell stressed to us the necessity of precision in language. Did he not?
Given everything that has come out in the Epstein
files. This is the exact argument I keep making, you know, and people get mad at me just because I like precision. They're like, well, you know, go. It doesn't mean anything.
And all the testimony we've had from women and girls and people who were in his orbit, I don't think any sane person objects to the use of the word paedophile.
Non sequitur. People making arguments that he committed, the things that you're accusing him of, whether or not they were crimes, right? Like, yes, no one's denying the fact that stuff happened, right? But we're disputing whether or not it was actually it's actually definitively considered pedophilia over here. Not whether he actually, paid these young women to go. I feel as if I'm becoming a lawyer for Jeffrey Epstein right here. And this is... And I'm not. I don't like any of these guys. You know, they're probably involved in a whole bunch of heinous, horrible shit, right? I can say that quite comfortably. But when you're making dumb arguments, this is what you invite.
Actually,
in relation,
do you simply not care that it's factually incorrect that Jeffrey Epstein was? Well,
I don't think. It is factually incorrect. I mean, Michael,
have you read the June 30th, 2008? Transcript of the plea hearing when he entered his 2 guilty pleas in Florida? I would imagine you probably haven't.
I'm sure he would deny being a paedophile. That's what pedophiles tend to do.
Not always. I think a lot of pedophiles actually acknowledge that and actually say what they are. But there's a distinction between having a dispute in regards to what the definition is, and then denying that you've actually done something, right? These people are having different conversations. One person here is too angry to acknowledge that his argument is different to what the other person's argument is, right? And he's basically straw manning the argument here, and it just becomes chatter. And I think it's really important to understand terms. And like one of the first things you do when you're having any kind of argument is to make sure you're on the same page in regards to what the terms mean. Otherwise, you just have chatter. It's where I think a word means something and you think a word means something else. Now, this guy's already explained his position on what the actual definitive definition of pedophilia is, but rather than disputing this and saying, hey, look, I don't think that's what the definition is, and I don't want to work with that definition, fair enough, and they can have this understanding, okay, when I'm using the term, I mean this. When I'm using the term, it means that. No, this other guy is just pretending, right? The guy that's saying that, Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile and so forth, just pretending that there is no disconnect here in regards to the meaning, and that, you just don't understand what's going on. The guy that's making the actual factually consistent definition of pedophilia just doesn't understand the situation, which could not be anything further from the truth.
He wasn't even charged with anything to that effect.
Michael, this is such a strange hill to die on.